let's get to Spurs Knicks. 20 years old. I mean, can we just do the full Jacoby mea culpa? We started the season with you doing the lose Wembanyama thing. I mean, you want to talk about a wrong side of history. My God. You just watched.
I was absolutely right. I was absolutely right at the time, and I'm still right now. And his success is largely because he listens to the podcast and has made some adjustments. So you're welcome. I'm basically like a coach, like a mentorship. It's like an apprentice-apprentice, sort of like Padawan Jedi relationship that Wembanyama and I have. So
I'm gonna give a quick little shout out. This showed up on my timeline yesterday. This is from a guy named John Gondelman. It said, "I started describing Wemby to my wife and realized that between his name, physical attributes, and resume, it sounded like I was talking about an imaginary friend."
It is like
how is he a real thing?
It's not just the height, because we've seen like Manute Bol or whatever, Yao Ming. We've seen it's the way he moves.
But it is kind of the height.
Well, the height, obviously, it's the first thing that jumps out at you. But like, we've seen tall players, but watch Joel Embiid run up and down the court, and then watch Wembanyama run up and down the court. Do you see what Towns was asked afterwards about the two of them? He's like, oh, so you and Wembanyama, there's some similarities in your game and this, and he's like, no, dude, I'm 7 feet. He's like, this guy is like 9 feet.
9 feet tall. There was the best was there was like this break and Brunson gets it. And you remember the play I'm talking about? And it's just those two.
Yeah, it's just triple down.
And Wemby got the goaltend. And it truly looked. So the other night when I was watching games, my kids came. We have a mini goal in the upstairs. And my daughter is like, I want to play. And so she starts playing with my son. And I look over at him and I'm like, bro, let her score like once. And he's like, no. And so she's like trying to make moves. I mean, he's swatting the ball all over the game room. Like, she has no chance. She'll never score. They're playing on a mini hoop. He's almost 15. Okay. And there was that moment yesterday where I was like, that reminds me exactly of what I was watching the other night, where it's like, if Jalen Brunson goes to the basket and Wembanyama's there, he would never score. Like, never. No. It would never happen. It was that level of ridiculousness where it's like, okay, just swat it away. He's like 2 feet taller than him.
So what frustrates me about Wembanyama is not the shot selection or whatever I was talking about earlier, and still think it should change. It's he gets credit for blocks. He had 4 blocks in this game, but his impact is like so much more than 4 blocks. You know what I mean? Because it's like he reminds me sort of like a really hard hitting linebacker, like Vontaze Burfict. You know what I mean? Or like Lawrence Taylor, like Ronnie Lott. And you're the receiver coming across the middle. You're just so cognizant of where that human is and what can happen to you if you continue.
Yeah.
And that's what it feels like Wembanyama is. It feels like someone gets by their guy and they're going to the cup and they're like, I'm going to do what I do. It's like, oh, nope, there is Wembanyama. I'm not going to do what I normally do. Let's reevaluate this whole entire process.
Thus, how amazing Mikal Bridges is in this game. Because it's not only the threes, but then he starts hitting all these mid-range things, and it's all like, hey, do you have a guy that can make all of these shots from 10 to 15 feet and then the three? Because what we're not going to do is get within 6 feet of the basket, because if we get within 6 to 8 feet of the basket,
good point,
then there's that guy.
That guy is there.
And then you have somebody like Bridges who just goes absolutely nuclear. I mean, as a Knicks fan, you had to be on absolute cloud 9 watching him, and how he has come along throughout the month of December, really come into his own as this hybrid of the Suns Bridges and the Nets Bridges.
It's interesting watching Bridges. There was so much discussion about his shot and the hitch in his shot. They changed his shot. Remember, Anthony Edwards was talking to him about it and blah, blah, blah. And he was, he's like, for 755 in the preseason or something. It was like all this discussion about his shot. And when it doesn't go in, it looks so broken and so weird. And you're like, how is this man a professional basketball player? But when it does go in, you're like, oh, he's just a shorter Kevin Durant. Like, I mean, how can you ever stop this man? He can, when it does go in, when it's working, because he gets the ball so high above his head before he starts his release, and he's got such long arms that when it looks wrong, it looks so wrong. But when it looks right, you're like, oh yeah, 5 first-round picks. I would have traded 7 first-round picks for this guy. This is what they want.
And I think you have to have just incredible promise about how you're playing on Christmas Day. And it wasn't some kind of monster Brunson game. It wasn't a monster.
Oh no, he wasn't
Towns
good.
game.
He was not. Brunson was not good.
But this is the kind of stuff you need, right? You need when we get to playoff time, there's only so much that you can load up against. There's only so much you can load up against. And when you have another guy that can do that, that's when you get to the playoffs and it's like, all right, there's that third guy that's getting it, like he's the man tonight. And so I think the more often you can have the big OG Anunoby nights or the big Mikal Bridges nights, it gives you confidence that if you can make it into the playoffs healthy. Meanwhile, by the way, Bridges has played like the most minutes in the NBA. He's got all these crazy December stats. He has been great. Like shooting from the field, shooting from 3, the whole thing. And so that it felt like that was a culmination of kind of what has been happening in December. Obviously, it was extreme, but the point is he's been great throughout this month.
It was another thing I always want to give a shout out to is it's the offensive rebounding, because I think that Hartenstein brought a lot of that for the Knicks, and they got 17 offensive rebounds. And Josh Hart, we all saw down the stretch, got 2 of them. I think that was really important for them. And I think that they're making a concerted effort to feature Bridges in this way, because I think everyone else is comfortable in their role. I think Towns is obviously, we don't have to celebrate him. We have so many times, but it does feel like the team as a whole, because they are so close and have their history, is kind of saying it to each other without saying to each other, let's get Mikal going. Let's get him going, because that's what's really going to help make this sort of engine hit top speed. And I thought that was interesting. Another thing I found interesting is after the game, Wembanyama was like, he was really reflective. When you listen to him speak, he's very like introspective. He's more depth in his answers than you get from a lot of superstar players. And he was like, he's like, we're not ready. He said that we're not ready. We're not ready to win these type of games. And I was looking at him, I was like, man, you're not. Like Chris Paul doesn't like, with like, it just feels like this team is one of those teams that's just right in the middle, not bad enough to be a top pick and not good enough to contend and maybe win a good regular season game here and there. But they're just kind of nowhere.
No, this is the trajectory of a lot of good teams that end up being great, which is that first year, you're right around 500. And then you explode. So
this is the second year. So all right,
I would buy stock in next year's Spurs, is what I would tell you. This happened with a lot of great young teams with young superstars. That you have that first year where you're closer to 500, you're around Midland team. Like, you're not bad, but you're also not really good. And then you take the huge leap next year. I would buy stock in next year's Spurs.
Well, I would also agree with Wemby that they're not ready. They're not ready.
But that's part of it.
Yeah, they're not a serious team.